Benjamin Castle are Americans. Watching the footy.
Liam Ryan saying, kick it my way, I want to jump over the pack, and here he comes! Ryan!
This is Buddy Franklin! This is the greatest showman!
Got the handball off to Myers. Myers looking for the lead of Stengel. Gee, they're good. Gee, they're sharp. Razzle dazzle Rioli.
Oh, who else? McDonald!
From inside the centre square. Boys kick the goal. Boys kick the goal. From inside the centre. Foul. Oh, they can't believe
that. Good time of day yet again, everybody. This is episode number 184 of Americans Watching the Footy. It is our round 15 progress reports, the last of our progress reports, and the last of the bye week rounds.
Life comes at you quickly.
We've got only one team that's in the 8 as of now getting a bye this round, but I'd say all but 2 or 3 of these teams are definitely still in contention and all have provided some interesting content. 5 are Victorian teams.
Look at us with the Vic bias. Who are you?
I'm Ethan Castle. I'm in South San Francisco, California.
I'm his brother Benjamin in San Diego.
You want to just...
So let's just jump into it.
All right, then let's do the spinner and let's get it on, yeah?
Don't say that to your brother. Well, off the top, we are going to go with the 9th place Western Bulldogs, who substantially boosted their percentage this past Saturday with that big win over Frio. They now have the second best percentage at 119.7, and they did it while missing a fair number of tolls, so impressive there. They sit at 7-7, just outside the top 8, but I've got a feeling they'll be there in that 5th or 8th range because, well, they're trending that way, and also it's what the Bulldogs do. It's pretty amazing to me that despite regularly making finals appearances, Luke Beveridge has never led the Bulldogs to a top 4 finish. This is his 10th year at the helm.
This team is frustrating because you see how high the ceiling is, and yet there's a maddening lack of consistency. Second best percentage of any team, which I know that isn't the be-all and end-all, but their ceiling is so high.
And we saw their ceiling in a bit of a different dimension this past week because for much of the season, they've had 1 or 2 key pieces missing from the midfield. Well, really, ever since Tom Liberatore went out with that first concussion, they've tried Ed Richards in the middle, but they haven't had Libba and Richards there alongside Adam Treloar and Bontempelli until this past Saturday, and damn, it worked. Liberatore, the clearance monster still. Treloar with a bit more of that outside carry. Richards coming into the center square from the half forward to affect center bounces. That's a move that I really like, and it jumbled up some of Frio's structure. And then Marcus Bontempelli is Marcus Bontempelli. Doesn't matter if he's coming back from the flu. If the tag is in vogue, I don't know why you don't tag the guy. Longmuir.
Well, Brisbane did tag him, right?
I think Jared Berry was on him and limited his involvement at the bounce, which is an achievement in and of itself against Bontempelli.
Yeah, he still ended up with 3 goals, but kept him below 20 touches, I believe. What hasn't been so good? Well, there's been a lack of consistency, like I said, especially in terms of some of the talls. Like Rory Law went from getting subbed out for doing nothing against the Lions to having a really good game against the Dockers. I never know what you're going to get out of the mix of him or guys like Alex Keith, who's now out with a hamstring injury, Buku Kamis, also just getting guys like him into consistent roles.
Inky received very mixed reviews this past week, our friend of a friend of the show.
I thought he was solid. I didn't think he was amazing.
I could understand dropping him in favor of your sleeper pick, who we're still waiting on to get a debut.
Yeah, that's another frustrating thing. Just some of the lineup selections each week. You know, I will say recency bias. Lockie Bramble did have a good game this past week.
Bramble and Law both answered our calls big time. That's something that tends to happen.
But I don't get why you keep rolling like him and James O'Donnell in. You know, at one point giving Keith games over Kamis, who was clearly the better one-on-one defender.
Keith did have a nice game in terms of clearing defense, but not as much in terms of the actual one-on-one play. That was shortly before his hamstring injury. But yeah, I think talking about this defensive mix is a good time to bring up both of our sleepers. So James O'Donnell was mine. The son of Simon O'Donnell has played in 9 games this year and had a surprising stint forward, which looked pretty good, actually, a couple Fridays ago against the Lions, kicking 2-1 from 8. Then he went straight back into defense, ? This is another case where the lack of definition in true roles in this team makes them a more perplexing and frustrating watch at times, because O'Donnell has not been super strong in terms of one-on-one defense, and I would have liked seeing him get another shot up front, even though, well, it clearly wasn't necessary with how Lobb played.
Decent ball mover, but you have other guys to do that. Just some of the lineup decisions make no sense, such as not getting Jed Busslinger a game,
when he's been doing more than fine in the VFL.
And he seems like someone that the club is pretty high on.
Consistently one of their most active defenders in the twos, played 9 games there this year. At the end of his draft contract, he was picked number 13 in 2022. And if you're trying to convince a guy from all the way across the country to stick around, wouldn't you want to give him a shot?
Also, I think just in a merit-based system, he deserves a shot. That's one of my issues with this team, is a lot of their decisions are not merit-based.
Until this past week, you could say that about Bramble and Lobb. You still don't know where Buku really belongs full-time because of his forward play in the reserves.
When Lobb was subbed off in round 13, it's the first time this year we have had a Bulldog sub that we have categorized as a "you suck."
And it was so bad that I made the "what does he even do" meme. Well, he responded to that by saying, "I kick 3 goals and I'm good below my knees." Now, does he continue getting opportunities once Aaron Naughton comes back, which could be right after the bye for his severe knee injury, and with Sam Darcy coming off suspension?
Darcy had been playing really well, had that really good game in which he got suspended against Collingwood.
Did he get the Rising Star nominee from that, or was he already nominated earlier?
I think he was already nominated.
He was nominated in round 4.
Also known as the
Gather round.
Right you are, for his 3-goal performance against the Cats.
This team's struggles against Geelong are very indicative of my frustrations with them.
I mean, fun for you.
Yes, but my point being, this is an obviously extremely talented team that frequently underachieves.
I wouldn't want to say that it's Port-like, because their results, I think, have more variance against just very different parts of the ladder compared to Port, where you feel like you know what you're going to get with Port. They're going to underperform against the top 8. The Bulldogs, it's just certain matchups that get to them, it seems.
I don't understand a lot about this team.
Thinking about the positives, though, in the defensive lineup, because that's worth talking about still. On the other side, Joel Frazier's worked his way into things more in terms of the movement than the one-on-one.
I have really liked Frazier. I thought it was weird bringing him in at first, and he's just been a really solid, consistent producer, good ball mover, plays a pretty mature game, I think is the best way to describe him.
And it's not like he's a mature age recruit. He was pick 45 this past year. He's 18 still.
Yeah, I'm surprised that he got a game ahead of Busslinger, but he has proven that he belongs.
And on the older side, Bailey Dale is looking like he could be in contention for a second All-Australian. It's not just the activity, it's the effectiveness in that activity for him. He's a largely uncontested player, but he's an accurate one. Play often fans out from him, especially because through him, the Dogs tend to go inside out. They like to go to the outside from defense, but stay in the corner in the midfield a lot. I want to see really how they can work out some things on the wing, because that would open up a lot for them. You have so many good pieces in the middle. Could you see Trelaw going out to the wing on occasion to support there, perhaps? Or is there another player that maybe we haven't talked about yet that could fit that role better? Well, James Harms coming back maybe could open things up.
Yeah, I think Harms would probably be the guy, because I really like Trelaw on the inside when he's not turning the ball over.
which he hasn't
And in
been
the
at
last
late.
few weeks, he's been much better with that. Again, my frustrations with this team, and it's weird saying this after they've had a better stretch, but it's the lineup decisions. Why was Riley Sanders ever taken out? And then
And Sanders could play inside and out too. Maybe shifting between Treloar and Sanders there could be the solution.
Riley Garcia getting omitted after being one of the only good players against the Lions and one of the more consistent players for this team all year.
I think that was extremely tough there between trying to keep Sanders in and also bringing Richards back into the fold. It was almost a case of too much in the middle.
I mean, you could have just not brought Anthony Scott in.
That seems like the most logical one there. While I've liked what Scott's provided over the past couple years, he hasn't been able to cut it as of this point in 2024.
He also would concuss 2 minutes into his first game of the year, which didn't do him any favors.
But thinking about the wing again, I think a combination of Harms and Sanders with a bit of support from Treloar, that could end up being a longer-term move there. Because remember, they're very likely to not have Bazlenka next year.
Yeah, he's 99% gone. My other issue with this team is that the ceiling is so high and they just don't often reach it. Having the second best percentage is one indicator of that. But also remember against the Swans, if Ed Richards doesn't get concussed, which was their second or third injury of that game, there's a very good chance they win that game. This team at its best can beat anybody.
And that's even with Tim English being down from his All-Australian form last year. He's faded back into the pack somewhat, and not just in terms of ruck play, in terms of all over the oval. I've been wanting more from him.
He's just been kind of there, which is weird. I'm usually one of his biggest fans, but he hasn't been very good yet this year. And that's, I think, reason for optimism, because you would think, all right, he's due for a better stretch. And you can say, hey, we're here even without him at his best.
The Bulldogs have a pretty nasty stretch of games from round 17 through potentially 21. I'll definitely say 17 through 20. So after playing North under the roof out of the bye, and we'll see if North can keep their form from this past week, the answer will probably be no, but I'd like to be proven wrong.
Yeah, that seems like a game where North just gets out-talented pretty significantly.
Well, round 17, Saturday afternoon at Port. Round 18, Saturday twilight against the Blues under the roof. Then Saturday night at the Cats, round 19. And Sunday afternoon at the Swans, round 20, before hosting the D's. And he's still got another trip to Adelaide after that. The Bulldogs make 3 trips to the Adelaide Oval this year.
It's going to be weird having them not play on Friday nights and not play every game at Marvel, because that's kind of been the theme lately.
They only actually have one Friday game scheduled, and I don't think they get it the last round as of now. And it's that game against Melbourne, round 21, which, hey, that's part of a Friday double.
There's also a game out west, I guess. Is that what? Eagles and Suns?
I don't know why they decided to give West Coast a Friday game.
I mean, I'm all for getting a mix of teams, and maybe the spinner will hear this and set up a good transition. What about the Hawks, who, I don't like them, but they're playing damn good football and deserving of that sort of attention. Will the spinner play along with that? Do I get a good transition, or was that just
The spinner is asympathetic.
fuck, where are we going?
Do you remember, Ethan, what I said the number of round 14 was?
No. I remember that it was the highest scoring round in a while.
The number of the round, though, was 92,311.
Because that's how many people came out to see Dusty.
Yep, we're going to Tigerland.
All right, I think I can sum this team season up very quickly. They're all hurt. Everyone tore their ACL.
How about 5 of them? In order, I think it was, Josh Gibcus, Judson Clark, Sam Naismith, Tyler Young, and Mykelti LaFau. I might have swapped Young and Naismith around.
Okay, now do it all in one breath like the names of Heyman's kids at Purim.
Yeah, no. But everyone's done their knee. And LaFau's is the most disheartening for us just because of what he provided this team in terms of physicality and a forward solution in the absence of Tom Lynch, who obviously will still need some time to work back to AFL level, just coming back from injury this past week. He's, hardly played in the past year and a half. But LaFau was someone who just burst onto the scene in the preseason. I noticed him in the scratch match against Melbourne and alerted you to him.
He was like the only bright spot during the worst of the injury stretch. I referred to him as a big ball of muscle.
You know, he's got a rugby league background.
I know. One of the more exciting full forwards, can entertain even if he never touches the ball outside of the forward 50. Really, rock bottom was that stretch, beginning with the loss to the Eagles and ending with the 119-point loss at the Gabba.
119.
And then since then, they've come back and played much more competitive and respectable footy, starting with Dreamtime. Competitive at Geelong, had a halftime lead there, beat the Crows on the road, and then they didn't do much outside of Tim Taranto in the loss to Hawthorn this past week, which if it wasn't Dusty's milestone game, you would honestly just say, whatever, they won the week before. But I still think from a big picture, this season could actually kind of end up a positive.
I think with the shorter list, Adam Uze has needed to be more decisive in terms of moving magnets and putting younger players into more prominent roles right away. And some of them have shown from that. Lafau, well, he's not younger, a mature age or there. He's 25 or 26, but he stepped up right away. I want to note Kane McAuliffe, who has not really built up full game endurance yet, but after starting a few games off really well, has done nice things as the sub for a couple weeks running now, including back home against the Crows. Excellent stint there. I think it was 7 disposals and 5 contested after coming on at the start of or during the fourth.
Well, I want to mention, I think it's really hard to evaluate Uze with how limited their list has been.
He might have the toughest task in the entire league this year.
But the positives come out of just, this probably wasn't going to be a finals team to begin with. You're almost certainly now going to finish with one of the 3 worst records, maybe 4th worst if things really go south for one other team in particular.
I think it could be 2 teams on the bye, actually, that could contend for that.
So you've got guys that are getting experience that probably wouldn't have come otherwise. You're probably going to luck into a soft schedule next year. And it's gives you a chance to evaluate a bunch of guys that you probably wouldn't have been evaluating as much, such as Tom Brown, who was really good in that win over the Crows.
Brown ought to be a Rising Star nominee soon. He hasn't gotten it yet. It was Luke Nankervis, actually, in that game itself. And round 14, it was Harvey Thomas of the Giants. But Brown has been a really clean field kick the whole season and has willed himself into more contests around center half back and even pushing into the center circle in defensive rebounds. So positives there. On the taller side of defense, I wasn't sure if my 2023 sleeper Ben Miller would pan out. And the answer is, yeah, he's shaping up to be a very nice tall defensive support for Noah Balta, who after he was allowed to stay back in defense has been a rock back there. It's been Balta in terms of the one-on-one play and, of course, engineering movement from halfback. Still hasn't ever been an All-Australian, and considering how the team's going, probably won't be this year, Nick Flostone.
How has he never been one? That's kind of insane, but he's been really good in that sweeping role. His intercept game is excellent. His field vision is great. He's a good kick. You want to talk about the guys who have been there and have been like part of the positive core for this team?
From the back, Balta and Flostone. Working into the middle, Taranto went healthy, obviously. And Liam Baker is often present at center bounces as well, so you can put him in there even though he could just flex all over the oval. I am a big fan of Liam Baker. I think that's been pretty well established at this point. One of the most active small players in the league, and you can also say that about Shea Bolton.
Shea Bolton is also just super fun and exciting.
You've called him Hollywood in the best way.
Like, the level of production is good. The excitement factor takes him like way above that.
He's the first player at this point that I point out or just mention when people here in the US, my friends, are asking me like if Richmond's on, who should I be watching?
If you're to pick at the start of the year, like who's going to kick goal of the year, he's a super safe bet.
Oh, he is the most likely player. I think him and then Bobby Hill would be the 2 most likely players to take out both goal and mark in the same year at this point. And I thought that about Bobby before Sunday.
Jacob Hopper's been good when healthy, but he's been out most of the year with a hamstring injury. Should be back shortly after the bye, which should help this team be significantly more competitive.
In case you've forgotten, these guys beat the Swans.
At some point, I'm going to have to go back and look at that game again and figure out, just like how that happened. Like with the context we have now. I mean, my belief is still, a healthier, because that was not an extremely healthy, but a healthier Richmond team is not finals material, but is like not that far off.
Like hovering around 12th or so?
Yeah, something like that.
From that win against the Swans on the Sunday of round 3, Morris Rioli Jr. had a really high effort game, followed the ball well.
Unfortunate that he's been out injured, because he was another one who was super fun to watch. Like, obviously on the smaller side, but man, he packs a punch when he tackles, and it was fun watching him fly around. He should be back within a month after the bye.
Yeah, it was syndesmosis there. Really, they've got an exciting small group in general. Baker, Bolton, Morris, and also prominent in that game and in their other win against the Crows. As a small pressure forward goes, Ryan Mansell is probably not talked about enough. He's kicked 10 goals this year, which ties his career high already, but the work rate and tackling continues to go up for him. He's averaging close to 3.5 tackles a game, and those ones are felt. He had 6 in that win against the Swans and 8 against the Crows, so there you go.
So other than why everyone's hurt, other reasons this team is down is just a core aging out.
It happens to most flag teams. It's happening to Geelong even. It's very visible with the Eagles, and with Taranto and Hopper having been sidelined, it's been very, very visible for the Tigers without Jack Revolt and Trent Cotchin to begin with, too.
I think it's also worth noting that, like, for some of these guys, it's been a more graceful decline in retirement, and for others, it hasn't, like especially Dylan Grimes. Age has come for him, and it has not been pretty.
He actually hasn't even played since round 8.
He's been injured. He's got a back injury, but I think a couple of the games he's missed were just like, you're not playing well. We're not going to say you're omitted, but you get the message.
The defensive structure, though, is shaping up decently, as we mentioned, with Balta, Miller, Flosstone, and Dan Rioli as well. Rioli can accelerate play from pretty much anywhere on the field, and he may be, at this point, their most consistent player throughout the year. He also did have a stretch in which we gave him 3 polished turd votes in a row, which ties him for the lead.
Nothing he does really differentiates from anything he's done in past years. I would just, especially with when the midfield's been thin, I would just give him more try to get him to do more Nick Blakey lizard stuff.
You talk a lot about lizard runs, and he would be the type for it. I actually want to take a look quickly and see, because we've got, 12 polished turd votes to hand out for these guys. Daniel Rioli's gotten 3, Shea Bolton 2, and the rest.
I know Vlostone's got at least 1.
It was Hopper in the opening round, Flosstone round 1, Bolton in rounds 2 and 4. Of course, round 3 was the win, and you'd argue in that game probably Flosstone would have been their best.
Now you got me wondering, who was the one polished turd for the Swans?
That was Isaac Heaney, of course.
Not surprising.
Round 5 for the Tigers, polished turd went to Lafau. Round 7 was Morris. Rounds 8 through 10 was the Dan Rioli stretch. We gave it to Dusty in Dreamtime. That was a tough one to figure out. And Baker round 12, Taranto this past week.
Taranto was excellent. He was really the only one that showed up in the midfield.
Hell of a high snap goal, too. That's one of the goal of the week nominees, and I might place it third.
Let's see, my sleeper was James Trezise, who got in 1 game, the round 3 loss to Port Adelaide, and had 14 disposals.
I think he may have been hurt for a time.
Yeah, he had, looks like, an ankle injury at one point.
Has been steadily getting around the teens in disposals in the reserves at this point. More so of a half-forward role over the past month, so watch for that there. I remember him being a wing option once he made his debut near the end of last season. Speaking of wing play, I think the most consistent guy there has been Hugo. We haven't mentioned Hugo Ralphsmith. He's your guy, Ethan.
He's been pretty sharp lately. He was one of the members of the short list of positives from the loss this past week. The speed's good. He's been a lot more consistent with the ball. He has been avoiding turnovers much better.
And he's also getting more of the ball than last year, too, averaging over 13.5 touches, which is a couple more than last. My sleeper pick was Sam Banks, who's also dealt with some injuries. It might have also been his knee for him at one point. A couple active games in a row for him at the twos may start turning some heads against Port Melbourne and Box Hill, especially as a mark. If you're looking to diversify options around the half-back flank and then maybe get somebody else in there on the wing too, try some new things out, he's one that I'd like to see get some more opportunities. His last AFL game was a 10-touch showing in round 9 against the Dogs.
All right, you know what they say. Spin that wheel.
I've spun it all right.
I'm sorry I couldn't think of I was hoping to come up with one of those, a weird catchphrase that nobody actually has ever said. Like something that someone super out of touch would think is a thing people say.
Just like an old catchphrase?
No, something made up that nobody actually says. Sort of like one of those, like the commercial, a pitcher who paints the corners is known as a Rembrandt. That's what I was going for.
A coach who's given a contract extension and then shows no reasons why he should be given it is known as a Matthew Nix.
We are going into one of the multiple factories of sadness. Adelaide is 4-9-1. They're in 15th despite a 102.6 percentage. Now, the lopsided win over the Eagles is a big reason for that.
A 99-point win there. That is their only win in their last 6, though.
They started 0-4. Then they won 3 out of 4, including a great win at Carlton and a showdown victory, a 30-point showdown victory. Then they had the really fun draw against the Lions, and since then they've lost 5 of 6, and the one win was that Eagles game.
The one win that really stands out then, because showdown is always a toss-up, it seems, and of course you'd expect them to clean up against the teams below them. The only real impressive win, you'd say, would be the one against the Blues. And that was a game that I think a lot of people forget about in hindsight just because...
Oh, I don't.
Do you remember who had the winning goal?
That I do not.
That was super sub Sam Barry.
Oh, okay.
That was Carlton 14-14-98 defeated by Adelaide 16-4-100. That was a Saturday, evening game in round 5. An antidote for the... poor game that they had played to open against the Demons. Things clicked for that game just all over the list. Braden Cook popped up for a goal. He's been a bit of a strange one this year, going between 50s at times. I think he's been steadier forward as of late. There are a lot of younger things to be hashed out on this list. Forward, it's been especially noticeable in the past few weeks since Taylor Walker went down. Darcy Fogarty has managed to keep up his streak, which is pretty impressive. He's scored multiple goals in 7 straight games and has 23 for the year.
Is he their club leader? Only other guy I could even think of it being would be Rochelle.
Let me give you the double-digit goals on the club. Braden Cook is in 6th with 12. Ben Keys has 15. Tied for 3rd on 17 are Tex and Rochelle. Rankin has 22, and Fogarty is your leader by 1. Rankin would obviously have that lead had he not missed time with the hamstring injury. By the way, 24.2 is much greater than 15.
Rankin's been awesome.
He may have been best on in that Collingwood game in the first place. And it's not just been the forward work, it's been the shifting in and out of center bounces and establishing a pretty good rotation when he's been in that for some reason dried up when he was out and has not involved Josh Rochelle nearly enough. Rochelle is in many ways on this team, despite his 17 goals, an enigma.
The inner machinations of my mind are an enigma.
When this team was playing really well, going back to the Carlton win and the showdown win, they were rotating the forwards in at center bounces, and then they just stopped doing that. And it wasn't like, they were deterred by a bad game from it. They just kind of
went away from it
for no reason.
And when Rory Laird has taken a step down, and you used to think of him as just like the thing in the middle, and when Jordan Dawson has been thrown every which way and still performed this year, but may have faded off a bit just with the rest of the team, in this last stretch, you need more solutions there. Matt Crouch is out for the season with that AC joint injury.
Unit lost.
Luke Pendler could be nice to throw in there because we've seen his forward work and he's been getting steady time as a midfielder in the twos and showed well. So maybe Pendler, Zach Taylor, a couple other guys there could be brought into the mix and actually brought into the rotation. This is a time to really get shit figured out and show why, Matthew Nicks, if you do deserve another year, show it. Move some things around, make savvy decisions.
Jordan Dawson has been excellent, by the way.
Would you say as he goes, team goes? Or do you think there's a more...
No, because I think he's been good even in some games where the team hasn't been. And I'm just wondering if there are ways you could better structure the team around him.
Usually you would build a team from the inside out. And really that piece in the middle around which this team has been structured for a while now has been Rory Laird. With Laird taking a step back and things just not working in this stretch in general, I think it's reasonable to try and build the team out from elsewhere. You have Dawson often in the center bounce, lined up like across from Laird, I would say, across from the ruck contest. Figure out how to put the game around Dawson, Riken, and Rochelle in the forward 2/3. And in the back, you've got some good development there. Max Michelani has been an interesting watch, building up in terms of toughness and one-on-one ability against small and mid-sized forwards. Recently, though, he's been put further into the middle and did a decent job for, I'd say, maybe 2.5 to 3 quarters, trying to put a tag or just running with Chad Warner. And on the taller end, I was really disheartened by Josh Worrell breaking his arm because he'd been going very well right before that.
I would have given him the showdown medal. I think Jake Saligo got it. Saligo's had a really nice season.
His best to date. Worrell, though, we gave a lot of appreciation to across that stretch from the Blues game into the wins against North and Port. He's still 5 to 7 weeks away, so maybe you'll see him for a bit of August. Without him, though, you'd expect your sleeper to step up, and he's been given some different roles.
My sleeper is James Borlase, who I've really liked.
Well, the Sharif don't like it.
He's played in 8 games, had just 5 disposals in the loss to the Swans this past week. They tried him forward against Richmond, and he kicked a goal. I think his best calling right now is as like just a one-on-one tall defender. He's got a lot of muscle, but you could, in theory, make him a tall forward to kind of like fit in there, especially as Taylor Walker gets phased out. But, you also have, when healthy, Riley Thilthorpe for that.
And Thilthorpe could be back as early as, well, right out of the bye. That will be an extremely welcome addition. If so, looking at some video, the man has bulked up, which we've been really wanting. And I think Thilthorpe has just been a huge missing piece for them this year. The Rucks have been underwhelming in terms of full field impact and maybe kind of direction on the hitouts. Riley O'Brien has been taken out for a couple weeks to give Kieran Strawn an opportunity, but Strawn is 28.
And I don't think he's been especially great.
We are probably the biggest Riley Thilthorpe fans outside of South Australia. So having him in there as the second ruck, plus supporting Fogarty as a tall forward, and Fogarty and Thilthorpe both can have that full field markability. We've seen it from both of them. I think the forward line will click a lot more. I think the team can and should click a lot more once Thilthorpe gets back into AFL quality form. And it's not just text, by the way, when it comes to older players losing step a bit. It's to the point that Brodie Smith was put in the twos. That's like sacrilege by Matthew Nicks' standards.
Yeah, Smith started the year really nicely, kind of doing some of the stuff Dawson does, but from further back and then has fallen off. The more I think about this team and just like the makeup of this list, I think it's going to require like some creative solutions, because you've got a guy in Dawson who can control the middle, maybe less from a physicality standpoint, but from his field vision and kicking accuracy, and he does it from a bit further behind the actual middle of the ground. And then you've got these forwards that you can rotate into the middle, young defenders with some promise, and tactically it's going to take probably some thinking outside of the box, because I like the individual pieces. I just don't like the way it's all been added together.
Couple other players I want to mention there on the younger side, because I didn't even realize the older one of them is still younger than me. He's just 23 and a half. The Murray brothers. So Nick finally came back from his torn ACL this past week and looked like he belonged right away. And then his brother Toby had been playing in the sample for the Crows and was picked up as a midseason draft selection, another ruck forward option there. I'm not sure if he and Phil Thorpe would be together in an AFL lineup, but especially if Texas is still on the decline, I'd like to see that. See if it can work. This back half of the year is for development and for proving that this coaching staff could still cut it. I find it unlikely at most other clubs that Knicks would get a pass, but Tim Silver seems pretty set in his ways. My sleeper has been another one of the frustrating pieces, that being Ned McHenry, who has been put into sub role a couple times recently, played in 9 straight games, round 2 through 10, before being dropped. I had always thought of him as somebody who could potentially fill some gaps on the outside and help with the wing a bit, but he hasn't cut it to the extent that I thought he could, especially after being used as the sub so frequently last year. He had 7 games as the sub in for 2023. He's one, along with, I guess, Lockie Murphy and a couple others who have really come under fire as of late, and I think their play not being up to standard has resulted in further frustration with the coaching staff. Murphy is 25. I thought he was older and has been playing more forward, which I don't understand. There's a lot I don't understand here. And it's not just because I'm in year 5 watching, it's just because these magnets don't seem right.
You know, Benjamin, 78% of our listeners are between 18 and 35 years old, so they probably want to start a podcast like we did.
How do you know that number, Ethan?
Thanks to the analytics we have for Spotify for Podcasters.
Formerly known as Anchor, sorry Frio fans, Spotify for Podcasters has tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast from your phone or your computer. No fancy software needed.
It's so easy you can edit it while drunk.
And Spotify for Podcasters doesn't just allow you to upload to Spotify, you can also distribute your podcast on platforms like Apple, Stitcher, and more, just like we do.
Best of all, it's completely free.
Not only is it free, you can even make money from listener support or ad revenue. Hint, hint.
Download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to podcasters.spotify.com to get started today.
As a reminder, find us on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, and who knows where we'll pop up next, at Americans Footy. Definitely been more active on Instagram as of late. Find me personally on Twitter at BenjaminHK01. We'll definitely be more active there soon enough. I can tell you where we're not going to be is TikTok, because that app sucks. We're not going to be Chinese shills. It's also just a shitty version of Vine, and even if it would help our social credit score. Where can we find you? On Twitter at Castle Media. And what about that furry thing next to you? Instagram at Cat Named Brian. So he is next to you. He is now. Good. 3 teams to go, all Victorians. Only one of them in the 8, but one of them making a push and the other just being the other. And we're going to start with that other. Saints? Let's go with some Ross ball. The 14th place Saints at 5-9. They endured a 1-6 stretch rounds 5 through 11, and that only win was against North in a game that was better than their first matchup last year. I'll give them that. But they sit with 92.2%. And would you count them among the factories of sadness? I think historically they have to be. If there were any team to have a legacy of failure video from Tree, I think it would have to be them. The interesting thing is I still wouldn't count them out. And that's mostly because every time I make a prediction about this team, it's wrong. They are currently 10 points out of a final spot, a number which will presumably grow to at least 12 this week, just with the number of teams in front of them playing games. But the way they grind teams out, they're in most games. It's not an exciting watch. It's not a fun watch, but you can see some pieces there. And list-wise, I actually really love the depth of their recent draft class. You've seen all 5 of them get in this season already.
Yeah, you have Arriaga, Arriaga 2, Barriaga, Aruglia, and Pizzoza.
Leading the way in multiple respects at pick 18, Darcy Wilson, who is a semi-serious rising star candidate after having been sling tackled by the obvious rising star up to that point. A bit of a dip in form over the past few weeks before really bouncing back, more on the outside against Brisbane on Friday. And I think Brisbane's a good jumping off point because we saw both the ugly and the better of the Saints this past week. We know that they can move. They took it upon themselves to move it once they got down. It's a matter of just seeing it more from the beginning. And it's a matter of the forwards as well being able to get front position more often, because you can have a King twin in there, but if the King twin doesn't get the better of his matchup on the ground, it usually doesn't matter. That's been a concern even with Max having been semi-productive this year. Not as productive as his brother, but he's kicked 19 at least and fought through a couple injury scares. Rest of the draft class for the Saints, Lance Collard at pick 28, a Westerner, gotten in a couple games, hasn't done hugely impressive things yet. Angus Hasty at pick 33, similar in terms of not huge exposure yet. Then a really physical pickup at pick 50 and Hugo Garcia, who we definitely want to see more of. Definitely more of a full oval player, plays above his size on the ground, and I wanted him in this past week to match up against the midfield. But they did get another first-year player in, the last player in their draft class, Ari Schoenmaker, who is a hell of a left-footed kick.
Yeah, while the recent draft class is positive, I'm much more negative about what's happened to Matthias Filippo, who burst onto the scene last year and then has been dropped in the twos and just kind of had the life sucked out of him by Ross Ball. And I think that's an indicator of the bigger problem with this team. Despite giving up a season-high 126 points this past week, I thought they had some breakthroughs in that loss to the Lions. Seeing the benefit of playing Rowan Marshall off of another ruckman, even if he doesn't, that ruckman isn't great, that being Tom Campbell, spoiler alert, he was Benjamin Sleeper.
Yeah, he was. And I thought that he was a decent pick for that, considering what Marshall could do with the second ruck, and also because there's a reason that even if he did get an AFL game last year, you'd get him re-signed onto an AFL list at age 32. And with Jack Hayes having gone down yet again, it has ended up falling to Campbell to get that opportunity. I think that also is indicative of Josh Battle being more important in defense than in years past, or maybe keeping that up from last year. And so you got to keep Battle there rather than throwing him in as a second ruck option. Got to also remember the Saints were without Nazaya this past week.
You've made the point of him being like the perfect Ross Ball player.
Ross Ball still can have some pace to it, but more than anything, it relies on kick accuracy from the back and building uncontested. And he's the right type for that, especially on the younger side. He has already played 54 games. He was their top draft pick in 2021. That trio there of the 21 draft, now that's looking good. Nazaya, Pepper, and Windy.
Marcus Windhager has been an insanely good tagger, and not just that, has skill as an outside player with the ball. Liam Henry's been a really nice addition. Like, there are pieces here, and this past week makes me think that the talent is kind of being repressed.
Help! I'm being repressed!
Because they're too committed to the system. Defensively, Dougal Howard did his hamstring. He's been hurt a couple of times this year.
They weren't really able to properly replace him this past week. You don't put Anthony Caminiti up against Joe Danaher. Caminiti, my 2023 sleeper for the record, belongs there in that forward mix. And with some middling results overall from the Talls, I would have hoped that he'd have gotten maybe some steadier forward time, allow Max to do more leading into the forward 50, like we've seen his brother be able to do in the past. In general, both King twins, I would like to see them do more running from half forward, maybe some more inside marking there.
I guess he's not quite a true ruckman, but you could use Caminiti in that role as well.
And they've had him in the ruck in the forward 50.
They haven't had Marshall play off of him like they have with Tom Campbell this past week.
I mean, this was the first time this year that we saw it from anybody, Marshall playing off anyone. He was able to do great things last year despite being the lone ruck. That was the big surprise to us, considering the duo that he had with Patty Ryder, and he was the driving force behind the creation of America's Brownlow.
The difference this year isn't so much a decline in his ability. It's been that he's kind of just been way more content to a fault to just grab the ball out of the middle and then bomb it in as quickly as he can instead of really like survey his options or go shorter and play off of some of the good midfielders they have.
He is the leading yeet ruckman this year. It's him, and Kieran Briggs has fallen into that trap at times as well. Not as much this past week. Good adjustment for him there. But yeah, that 2021 class is a big positive there, along with the emerging 2023 players. Mitch Owens is one who maybe hasn't found his exact role yet. He's another one who can pinch hit in the ruck and plays above his size. Haven't seen him do as much vertically this year. But you've got the ability to spread out the mid to tall forward targets, and we haven't seen it as much in general. I think getting Owens more involved would open up a lot in general. He's on 15 goals this year. It feels like less. I don't know why. I think it's because he's only kicked 3 in the past 4 weeks. And then Windhager, yes, Ross Lyon has come back around to the tag. I think the whole league really has. And Windhager got under Lockie Neal's skin.
Looking at this team elsewhere on the Oval, Cal Wilkie has not been as good as last year, but still been solid. Like I said, Dougal Howard's been hurt. I've really liked Josh Battle.
What's a battle?
And they brought in Riley Bonner, who's had a couple of good games moving the ball out of the back and a couple where he's been kind of a turnover machine.
What's a bonner?
Friday was a better game from him in terms of that movement, and it wasn't just exclusively right down the spine from half back.
Jack Sinclair, I think he stepped down a bit from the last couple of years. He's still been all right, but hasn't been especially good. Jack Steele, still good in contests. Not like amazing, not legit Brownlow contender form, but still a quality player.
Jared Berry did limit him on Friday. That was a very good effort there. And the Saints weren't able to respond as well in terms of having play pushed to the outside until Henry really took some agency. I thought all along it would be Sinclair and Henry on opposite sides of the oval, and I think Sinclair needs to get a bit more of that outside play again.
Sleeper time. We already talked a little bit about yours.
How about yours?
James Van Ness, I thought he was in line for an AFL level game, and then he had a season-ending ankle injury.
Unit lost.
Oh.
So kind of call that one a wash.
Yeah, that would be a void. I have a couple of votes as well. Josh Goder being one of those from North. Saints have just one trip outside Victoria for the rest of the year, and that is to the Adelaide Oval in round 18. That could be a real sickos game.
Ooh, that's going to be fun. I'm actually really looking forward to that.
Saturday night, round 18, going up against the D's and Dons.
I actually made a point out of like claiming that game as we split them up. I don't know why. I just really want to watch that.
Still have the Power, Swans, Bombers, Lions, and Cats. All of those home games under the roof, along with the Eagles. Got the Blues to end the year. Can you admit at this point that this team is not finals bound?
They are most likely not finals bound. I still give them a better chance than the Crows. They do have a path there because they play a lot of teams in that mix. I don't know if they're going to do it by grinding games out or if they can make some real adjustments from this past week. I think if they were to lose to Port coming out of the bye, it would be time to start counting them out.
They're already 6 points and substantial percentage behind 13th. I think it's time already, and I think it's been time for a couple weeks, if not longer.
It would be, but again, this is not a team that I ever make predictions about. I think at the very least, they're going to play spoiler and mess up someone else.
I love messing things up.
2 to go, our last progress reports of the season. The next time we do any sort of in-depth team views like that will be for So You Didn't Crack the 8 during the pre-finals bye, which is another one of my favorite things that we do. Team number 17 then in our progress reports this year, the 7-7 12th place Hawks, who have won 6 of 7. Will Day has been the difference there in so many ways. And remember that only loss there was the last-minute collapse against the Power. They are a last-minute collapse there from being right in the mix there for finals, and I think they could potentially get there. They're well ahead of schedule, and you could make the argument there is no more important player to any team's structure at this point in the AFL than Will Day. You put him up there, I mean, among the Max Gawns of the world in that respect.
Fundamentally, I don't think they played an extremely different style with him versus without him. It's just the whole midfield's so much better.
It's the matter of having one main guy to focus on and another who could play off him, those being Jai Newcomb and Connor Nash respectively, with James Worpel having some up and down tendencies there. Now you've got really 4 to watch out for between Day, Newcomb, Nash, and Worpel, and that's a terrifying prospect for any team, especially with the physicality that Newcomb and Nash can provide, clearing the way for the others.
Nash, up until a couple of weeks ago, really hadn't even done all that much. It was during the GWS game, I think he really had his, I'm still here moment. During the win against North Melbourne after they'd started 0-5, I forget if it was Dwayne Russell or who that was doing that game and was saying, watch out, they're getting healthier. I will say, and this is not me being a hater, this is honest analysis, I don't think they're quite as good as they've been over these last 7 games. I think they're much closer to it than the team that showed up in the first 5. But I think these last few weeks, they've won a couple of tight ones against the Dogs and Giants. You're starting to see what it could look like. And I think maybe last year they were a year away instead of a year away from being a year away.
There's something to be said about the quality of opponents against who they've gotten the wins, potentially. If you're looking at the list of wins that really stand out, I guess it would be the Dogs, Lions, and Giants. And only one of those was a more comfortable win. Obviously, that 1-pointer against the Power stings. I'm looking forward to their rematch against Collingwood in a few weeks' time, because that was a close finish in the Gather Round. And there are so many storylines to that game, of course. You could potentially have a Joth Joust. Would that be the term for it? Joth Joust?
Sure. I don't know what other words you could go with.
I like it. And of course, that guy wearing number 33.
You're talking about Sullivan for Collingwood, right?
What a nice supplementary pickup he's been.
I feel very confident in saying that the worst case scenario for the Hawks is that they will be playing in a final by 2026. Worst case scenario. Something has to go horribly wrong for them to not be a finalist within this year or the 2 following seasons. Maybe it's next year. Maybe this year they come close and then take a step back and then really get there in 26.
7 wins, you would think 13 guarantees you finals no matter what. They've got the Eagles on the road coming out of the bye, the Crows on the road round 20. And they close out the year with Richmond and North, both of those home games, the North one being a true Tasmanian tussle in Launceston. If you pencil those in, that's 11. 1 or 2 more required. And if they win down the highway, all hell will break loose.
Yeah, I'm really not looking forward to playing against them.
You can tell, though, going back to Ginnivan, he seems to have been right in just saying that he has been allowed to play more freely this year. I think Sam Mitchell has allowed that in some respects for sure. It's a young list in general that's popping up, and he's definitely got the most experience in a lot of ways out of that young group forward of center. I mean, definitely more than Cal Sherdeer, who's learning well from Jack Gunston and is just an exciting player to watch vertically. And if Nick Watson can learn to be accurate in the top flight, he will be terrifying. In terms of the goal scoring for this year, Ginnivan is 3rd on the club. He has 15. 2 players are in the 20s.
Dylan Moore?
He leads the way with 22.
And the other... who's the other?
It's Mabior, thanks to his 4 this past week.
Awesome. Yeah, Dylan Moore has become a sneaky All-Australian contender these last few weeks.
I don't think it's sneaky anymore. I think it's legitimate now that he's become more accurate by hand. The set shot accuracy is a big uptick for him as well. I think he started the year by hitting his first 10 or 11. And he's just a natural player to follow up from the work that's done in the center. I think Moore taking a step up has been big. You could talk about this all about, it's the M's really. Moore, then there's Lloyd Meek finding form as the top ruck and really working well in tandem with that midfield group. We knew that Meek could do this. Now he's gotten the time and he's asserted himself over Ned Reeves very clearly at this point. Nothing against Reeves, but Lloyd Weeks a higher quality ruck there. Then there are some other pieces there who I think maybe a little further investigation would reveal for a lot of people, those being Connor McDonald and Cam McKenzie.
I might have pointed this out when we recorded our recap of round 14. The last couple of years was kind of like, here's the core. Now you're starting to see some of the more supplemental pieces, such as McDonald and McKenzie and Scrimshaw and Weddle, start to emerge.
Well, this is just McKenzie's second year also.
The other really scary thing here is that they've also found stuff out of Massimo D'Ambrosio, who's been one of the most improved players this year, both by champion data and just by subjective analysis.
That right there was the last one I was going to say, switching from M last names to M first names. He's legitimately the top ranked wing in the entire league. We told you so, Essendon. And my friend Cole, who is, just starting to really get into the footy and started to watch this Hawthorn game intensely this past Saturday, texted me, man, 16's been everywhere.
You saw it, I think it was the Bulldogs game, and then I saw it the next week against the Saints or something in that window.
We talked about this during the recap. It may have been the Dogs game. We definitely noticed by the time they were playing Port, that's for sure. He had been the sub so frequently, rounds 9 through 13 last year against Essendon, which were his final 5 games with the club. Subbed out and lost round 9. Subbed in and won rounds 10 through 13. And he had the winning goal against North, if you recall, in round 12, because Essendon and North are uncharacteristically close a lot of the time. But getting back to Hawthorn here, this is this sort of next level beneath the surface that you're starting to see emerge and assert themselves now that Day's back in and things are steadier in the middle. McKenzie can be one of that links outside and in, mostly in, I'd say, going towards center half forward. I've liked how he's put in the work there. McDonald more on the outside. And yeah, going further back into the fence, Jack Scrimshaw has had a steady job there. Josh Weddle has shown his versatility. He can sneak forward for a goal, got great speed, pinch hit in the ruck when Reeves went down in Launceston. And while he may not have won the actual hit-out battle, the actual positioning helped facilitate some of the groundwork. And this is despite the Hawks being so hurt so much of the time. I mean, look at how many pieces they lost for the first part of the season. Mitch Lewis has hardly played. He should finally be back after the bye. We've yet to see Chad Wingard this year at all. James Blyke was out for the season. No Denver Granger Barras. So especially in defense, they were undermanned. And Weddle and Scrimshaw have been big reasons for success, as well as obviously James Sicily and a less Frost-Bally Frost question mark.
Yeah, Sam Frost has still had a couple of Sam Frost moments, a couple of Frost ball games, but he's definitely been a much more stable piece and kind of that support in back to James Sicily, whereas you have guys like Weddle and Scrimshaw that kind of roam a little more.
Support on the tall side for sure. And then the movers out of the back, there's Carl Amon, who's been the big solution there. I think this is a year where he's more coming to his own and really found some stability in that spot kicking out of the back, as opposed to last year where he was still being moved around a bit.
All right, sleepers. Minus Cooper Stevens, who couldn't get a game last year. He has been hurt and couldn't get a game this year either. He should be back from an Achilles injury after the bye, but would take a lot for him to crack a lineup right now by no fault of his own.
We don't roll over our sleeper picks, but I would almost consider yours a reasonable one for next year just because it's got to happen at some point.
I'm starting to think it's not going to happen with the Hawks, and it's going to happen as a mid-season draft pickup or something somewhere.
I'll take him out west. My sleeper pick has not gotten a full game this year. That being Henry Hustwaite, subbed off Easter Monday, subbed in the next 3 weeks, and in the 2 since. He's another one of those taller midfield pieces that I thought could help make up for Connor Nash and maybe do a bit more forward of center. And Hustwaite has been much more active as of late in the reserves, but not much is broken right now. So don't try to fix things. If injuries do necessitate some shifting around, then maybe Hustwaite will get a chance. Let's spin the black and white striped wheel, because that's really all it is.
That Victorian bias has been ridiculous here.
The Pies were 0-3. Blink in there in third.
I mean, you would have had to, blink for a long time.
We knew they'd get their shit together. I think and they've had their cardiac games.
They've also had a lot of injuries that they've had to power through, but you've had more than just Nick Dacos, who has been excellent and has been in a way more physical, contest-heavy role, which I am fully supportive of.
It's something that we wanted, something that not a lot of people expected. The haters were wrong here.
It was never a question of if he could, it was more a question of if the team would put him there, and it's totally happened.
And that should persist, even with the midfield pieces that they'll be getting back pretty soon. I love how Nick has paired with Jordan De Goey. You really saw that in finals last year as well. The grand final maybe being the clearest example of all. They'll be getting Scott Pendlebury back probably right out of the bye from his bicep injury. He's staring down game 400. What do you think the crowd will be like for him?
I feel like that would have to be 90,000.
At least the 90s. And also Joe Richards, well, he's been more a forward role, but playing off the center square at times. A really nice mature age pickup. They've got a couple good mature age pickups in him and Sullivan, but Richards should be back within a couple weeks from his foot injury. I believe that was a break. Oh yeah, they're getting Brody Majacek back in terms of the forward look too, and that's even with Nathan Kruger having established himself after his return from injury. Things are going to look even more complete there really fucking quickly, and that's a pretty scary prospect for a team that has only lost one of their last 11 games. And it hasn't required Steele Sidebottom to go inside a bunch. He's been pushed to the wing this year, and he can still go. Start of the year, we thought he was in real trouble in terms of keeping his career alive. Nah, he's fine.
So why was this team 0-3, and why have they only lost once since? Well, in those first 3 games, the old guys struggled. Crisp, Pendlebury, Sidebottom.
Crisp received a major wake-up call in round 3. That Holy Thursday game against his old side, where he was brilliant as the sub. A goal from 13, 5 tackles, and he's been on a tear from there and was their most consistent player, arguably, this past week against North, in addition to having won the Neil Daniper Trophy the week prior. It's not anything new for Crisp, it's just the regaining of form.
Obviously, they moved Nick Dacos into the middle. That's been a part of things. And they've had a lot of guys step up in the face of injuries. Harvey Harrison and Lockie Sullivan, I think, are the best examples of that. Joe Richards as well.
Harrison is a legitimate rising star contender at this point.
I'm going to take another opportunity to mention how awesome Bo McCreary is. Just
he makes winning plays there. I'm going to say it for you.
It's not just that. It's 10 disposals, 7 tackles, 30 plus pressure acts. This past week was a very Bo McCreary game.
Holy crap, I just realized something, Ethan.
What?
If Pendlebury comes back right out of the bye for that game on the Gold Coast, if he plays through, his 400th game would be round 21 against
Carlton? That game's already sold out. That could get 100,000. That could be a grand final crowd.
Nah, MCC members.
Oh yeah, they don't want to be around those hooligans.
It could outdraw Anzac Day, though. That was, 93,644?
I don't know, that could be something special, though.
The home and away record is 99,000 something from a very old King's birthday game, or Queen's birthday back then, probably. But that would be, you think Dusty 300 is insane, then you'll see Pendlebury 400. Would they manage him to make sure it's at the G?
You know what would be really funny? If they make sure it's at the G, but it's not one of their home games. That would be such a great troll move.
I think that would be tough based on just what the schedule is. I mean, I like the idea of trolling there.
It would just be really funny because, after, they get a lot of shit over the fact that they really rarely have to actually travel. That would be too perfect.
The only way that could work would be if he misses 2 games between now and the end of the season, and then they could have a closing round against the Demons. There's a possibility that it's just round 22 at the SCG and Collingwood just has him take over the place.
I think that's highly unlikely. I would be shocked if he didn't get managed.
Even against the Swans?
Or they'd manage one between here and there. I don't think that one in particular, maybe.
If you manage him once, then you'd have to manage him a second time.
Yeah, so it's either not at all or twice.
Because they got their last 2 games actually at the G, the grand final rematch, part 2, and a Melbourne home game. There's some troll potential there, but yes, obviously Pendlebury, we've celebrated him. And it's, again, scary to think that they've largely been without him. But Harrison has emerged as a center half forward option and into the 50, a very accurate shot. I think he's kicked 9-1 from his first 10 shots in the AFL. Sullivan has helped with going from center bounce, helped make up for Tagoe at times while he's been out. And Richards is definitely emerging as a pocket option. I mean, as if they don't have enough of that already. Defensively, there have been the bigger questions, and Billy Frampton, I think, does still belong more back than forward. I think that'll naturally happen with the front half players coming back soon. But my sleeper, Charlie Dean, hasn't quite been able to cut it yet, and Frampton is just some much-needed one-on-one support for Darcy Moore, who can get outdone. Moore is not, a natural one-on-one defender, and the loss of Nathan Murphy there has been quite telling. I don't think if you had Murphy still around, Moore would be the one to match up against Nick Larkey, who got it for 4 in the first quarter on Sunday. Dean, by the way, finally worked through multiple injuries to get his debut this year. He's played 6 games total, and I don't think he's been anything particularly good or bad. He's been serviceable, but if you're looking for a flag, you need a step up from serviceable.
My sleeper has not gotten a game yet. It was one of their draftees from this past year, Harry Di Mattia. I picked him because he just looks like a proper Collingwood player.
I know he had some sort of lower body injury, I think a lower leg injury at the start of the year, so that hasn't helped there. But he's been in the conversation for getting an opportunity soon. I was thrilled to see Tao Jath get a game this past week. Mentioned him, I think, a bit earlier in this episode too, just because obviously Chankwa's brother. And he looked like he belonged right away.
Yeah, he looked solid. He didn't stand out especially, but for a first game, pretty solid. I mean, what else do you want out of a first game, honestly? It's like, there are a few different ways you can go. You can see a guy, where it's like, they're really poor and jittery, and you can tell, like, all right, this is not a chance to fairly evaluate you. We're going to give you another week. There are the guys who really seize the moment, and there are the guys who just kind of jump in and it's just like, all right.
No first game jitters for TJ. Obviously, as the reigning premiers, the schedule isn't going to be kind, but they've got figuratively 9 wins, and you would think that they would be in contention there for second or third. The prospect of a Carlton-Collingwood first week final is another fun thing.
Looking back at that start of the season, you realize that one of the losses is to the best team. One is to a team that has shown a really high ceiling at times. The one that doesn't fit is that Saints loss. Other than that, really not a lot of concern. I've been pretty consistent the last couple weeks that, like, obviously Sydney's above and beyond the rest. But I think the next tier is Collingwood and Carlton, at least from a consistency standpoint. I've talked about the Bulldogs and Lions being teams with the ceiling, but again, consistency. There is who they are. GWS, I'll wait and see as they get healthier. And then we'll see about like that Freo, Geelong, Hawthorn mix. But yeah, Collingwood, I would put the odds of them making it at least back to a prelim quite high.
That does it for our progress reports for the home and away season. As I mentioned, Slay Didn't Crack the 8 will allow us to do more of these sorts of investigations once the season is over for just over half the league. Next time we'll be talking to you will be for the round 15 recap as we get ready for the pointy end.
I guess, yeah. Find us on Twitter and YouTube and Instagram and a bunch of stuff. Americans Footy is our typical username. I'm on Twitter at Castle Media.
Brian Harambe is at CatNameBrian on Instagram. I am Benjamin HK01 on Twitter. And I gotta go to class, so bye.
Fucking nerd. These dumbasses aren't going to realize we recorded this before we recorded episode 183. Our very stupid listeners would never know that. We're not going to leave anything. I mean, this isn't even getting recorded. This is not a hot mic.